Today I'd like to discuss the idea behind compound interest, which Albert Einstein famously dubbed the greatest mathematical discovery of all time and the eighth wonder of the world. That's some powerful stuff, people. So let's go ahead and dig in. So what is the idea of compounding? Compounding is the process of generating earnings on top of reinvested earnings. And really, there are two major components to compounding that I want to discuss today. The first is the interest rate or the rate of return. This is the idea that the profit that you earn from interest, from capital gains, from dividends, can be reinvested and compounded over a period of time. And the second component to compounding here is time itself, because the amount of time that you can leave your money in to reinvest is critical to recognizing exponential growth. Kiplinger magazine actually recently wrote in one of their articles that when you're young, you've got an asset that money can't buy, and that asset is time. And today, I want to show you exactly how that concept plays out because I wholeheartedly agree. So let's take a look at our first example here, the growth of $10,000 through compounded earnings using our example friend Angela. Angela's got an initial investment of $10,000, and let's assume that she invests in a particular vehicle where she can earn 8% annual rate of return. And notice that I'm not calling this the interest rate because interest rates today are not near 8%, and they haven't been for many years, but it is possible to achieve an 8% rate of return. I also want to make sure that people are aware that this 8% annualized rate of return is purely hypothetical, and that in real life, losses may occur, rates may vary, but for this particular example, I want to assume that Angela is able to earn 8% year after year. So let's further assume too that Angela leaves her investment earnings in her portfolio every year. So in the first year, Angela takes her $10,000 principal. She earns 8% on that $10,000, which earns her $800. So by the end of year one, Angela has $10,800 in her account, assuming that she leaves those $800 in earnings in her account to grow. So now in year two, Angela is earning 8% on that 10,800. And this amount becomes Angela's new principal amount. And so the cycle repeats, and now she's earning 8% on that 10,800. So by year two, she's earned an additional $864. And assuming she leaves those earnings in her portfolio, she now has $11,664. So notice that the dollar return on Angela's investment grows every year as well as her new principal amount grows. And so this cycle again repeats in year three, and she earns $933 in interest or earnings or a dollar rate of return. And at the end of year three, she's got a little over $12,500. So these numbers may or may not be significant to you until you look at the scenario over a 40-year time frame. Bam! At the end of 40 years, assuming Angela has reinvested all her yearly earnings and assuming an annualized 8% rate of return, Angela would have over $200,000 or 20 times her initial investment in her account. And if you look at year 38 and 39 and 40, so the last 2 years of the loan, the amount of interest she would earn each year would be greater than her initial investment of $10,000. Salman Khan of Khan Academy once eloquently said, "If that doesn't blow your mind, then you have no emotion." Okay, so let's continue with this example of Angela and compare her to our buddy Jeff. So as we just saw, Angela invested $10,000 in year zero, as I'm illustrating at the bottom of the screen here, and she kept that money in for 40 years. Our buddy Jeff, here's our buddy Jeff right here on the right. He decides to invest double the initial amount, so $20,000, but he starts investing 20 years after Angela. So he's got half the time to let his money work for him. So let's further assume that both Angela and Jeff are the same age. They both plan on retiring in year 40 at the exact same time. So the question then becomes, who would have more money at year 40 when they retire? And what this chart demonstrates is that Angela would actually have nearly $124,000 more than Jeff at the end of year 40, even though she started with half the principal amount. And so, really, what this example illustrates is the significance of time, and more importantly, the significance of starting early, because starting early allows you to benefit from compounded growth. So, again, I want to emphasize that it's important to recognize that an 8% annualized rate of return is very hypothetical, and that actual rates may vary, losses are possible. But the key here is this. Even with half the initial investment, $10,000 versus $20,000 that Jeff invested 20 years later, Angela earned significantly more money than Jeff by starting early and by allowing her earnings to compound over a longer period of time. So, some concluding thoughts. I want to end with three main points regarding compounding interest. Compounding amplifies the growth of your money. And this assumes that your gains and your dividends over time are reinvested. But this is probably one of the most important concepts that I think actually most people recognize. But something that people may not recognize as much is that time is on your side, and that the longer you have to let your money work for you, the greater the reward, even if you start with a higher principal amount as Jeff did later on down the road. And as you saw with Angela, again, you don't need a lot of money to make compound interest work. So I'll conclude with this quote. It's an IKEA quote. And our friends, as our friends at IKEA like to say, you don't have to be rich, just smart. And I think that is very evident in compounding interest.